4:33 a.m. The South China Sea, 108 miles southeast of Hainan Island. The water here is deep, 3,000 meters of cold, black column beneath the keel. And in that depth, where light has never penetrated and pressure would crush an unprotected human body in an instant, USS Connecticut was running at 240 feet, her nuclear reactor turning her single shaft at a speed she had held for 6 hours. Her crew of 135 men moving through their watch rotations with the practiced quiet of men who understood that noise was death. USS Connecticut was a Seawolf-class attack submarine, the most capable attack submarine ever built by any nation on Earth. 107 meters of American engineering, displacing over 9,000 tons submerged. Armed with 8 torpedo tubes, 50-plus weapons, and sensors of such sensitivity that her sonar operators could hear a shrimp snap its claw at ranges that would seem impossible to anyone who had not sat in that control room and watched the waterfall display. She was in the South China Sea on a classified intelligence collection mission, monitoring PLA Navy submarine activity in and around the Paracel Islands, recording acoustic signatures, mapping underwater terrain, building the intelligence picture that U.S. Pacific Fleet needed to understand how China used these waters in peacetime so that it could dominate them in war. It was routine work, important work, quiet work, but at 4:33 a.m., it became something else entirely. The People's Liberation Army Navy had been planning Operation Sea Dragon for 17 months. Its premise was simple, and its ambition was extraordinary. China's military leadership had concluded, after years of being surveilled, tracked, and acoustically cataloged by U.S. submarines operating in what Beijing claimed as its maritime territory, that a decisive statement was required, not a protest, not a diplomatic note, a physical act. The capture of a U.S. Navy submarine in Chinese-claimed waters would be, in the strategic calculus of the PLA's Central Military Commission, the single most powerful demonstration of Chinese military capability and resolve that had ever been attempted against the United States. It would humiliate the U.S. Navy. It would expose the myth of American undersea dominance. It would give China a propaganda victory of historic proportions and a negotiating chip of incalculable value. The plan was intricate. 2 Type 093B nuclear attack submarines, China's most capable hunter-killer boats, had been positioned in a barrier patrol formation along the likely transit corridor of U.S. submarine activity southeast of Hainan. Their passive sonars configured in a coordinated binaural array that increased their collective detection range against even quiet targets. Above them, 2 Type 056A corvettes, equipped with hull-mounted and towed array sonars, conducted surface patrols. Their lower-frequency sensors designed to complement the submarine's higher-frequency passive arrays in a multi-layer acoustic detection net. 3 Plan Type 071 amphibious ships, each carrying a complement of combat swimmers from China's Naval Special Operations Force and a specialized submarine rescue and seizure vehicle, held position 60 miles to the north, ready to move south the moment a U.S. submarine was detected and localized. The seizure vehicle was a modified Type SRV-300 rescue submersible, fitted with cutting equipment, electromagnetic grapple systems, and enough combat swimmers to board a foreign submarine through its escape trunk if the vessel could be slowed, cornered, and compelled to surface. In Beijing, the plan's architects had calculated that a Seawolf-class submarine, once detected and localized by 2 Type 093Bs working in coordination with the surface ships above, would have limited options. It could fight, but firing on PLA Navy vessels in Chinese-claimed waters would be an act of war that Beijing calculated Washington would be unwilling to authorize. It could flee, but against 2 nuclear submarines blocking the primary escape corridors while surface ships prosecuted from above, flight was problematic. Or it could surface, which was what Beijing wanted. A surfaced USS Connecticut surrounded by PLA Navy vessels in the South China Sea would be the image seen around the world. They had made 6 catastrophic mistakes. First mistake, USS Connecticut was not alone. The PLA's acoustic detection net, sophisticated as it was oriented to detect a single U.S. submarine operating in the patrol area. What it was not configured to detect was the additional acoustic layer created by USS North Dakota, a Virginia-class attack submarine that had been tasked to provide covert escort to Connecticut on this specific mission, following intelligence indicators that a PLA submarine trap operation was being planned. USS North Dakota was running 4 miles behind and 800 feet below Connecticut. Her own passive sonar arrays listening to everything around both boats. She had detected the 2 Type 093Bs 22 hours earlier and had been tracking them continuously. The PLA's submarine trap had a second American submarine inside it that China did not know existed. Second mistake, the Type 093Bs had been identified and their positions were known. USS North Dakota's passive sonar had not merely detected the Chinese submarines. She had fully classified them, built precise tracking solutions, and transmitted their positions via extremely low-frequency radio to USS Ronald Reagan, operating to the east, and to Submarine Force Pacific Command in Pearl Harbor. Every U.S. commander in the Pacific knew the trap was set. Connecticut had been warned. She was not sailing blindly into a net. She was the bait in a counter-trap that U.S. Pacific Fleet had been constructing for 4 days. Third mistake, the Type 071 amphibious ships were visible. The 3 planned amphibious vessels holding positions 60 miles north of the operation area were large, surface ships operating on a calm sea with active navigation radars. A P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft from Kadena Air Base, operating at altitude, ostensibly on a routine maritime patrol, had been monitoring their position for 11 hours. Their holding pattern, their communications traffic, and their failure to follow any commercially logical routing had been assessed by U.S. naval intelligence as consistent with an amphibious standby posture for submarine recovery operations. The assessment had reached U.S. 5th Fleet and Indo-Pacific Command 31 hours before the operation began. Fourth mistake, the electromagnetic environment betrayed the coordination. The encrypted communications traffic between the Type 093Bs, the Type 056A corvettes, and the Type 071 amphibious ships, while encrypted, followed timing patterns and frequency hopping sequences that the NSA's collection architecture had been analyzing for months. When the pattern of communications traffic surged at 4:19 a.m., 14 minutes before the trap was sprung, U.S. Signals Intelligence assessed with high confidence that the operation was entering its execution phase. USS Ronald Reagan received the intelligence assessment at 4:21 a.m. Her commanding officer had already given the execute order to his air wing before the first PLA sonar ping reached Connecticut's hull. Fifth mistake, the PLA had no answer for what was above the water. Operation Sea Dragon's planners had built an intricate underwater architecture. 2 nuclear submarines, surface ASW ships, a specialized seizure capability. What they had not sufficiently accounted for was the air. USS Ronald Reagan was 140 miles east of the operational area. Her F-35Cs, loaded and armed, could cover that distance in under 15 minutes. Her EA-18G Growlers could jam every PLA radar and communications frequency in the operational area from the same range. The planned Type 056A corvettes that were the surface component of the trap had no answer for F/A-18 Super Hornets, prosecuting anti-surface missions from beyond visual range. Sixth mistake, the seizure vehicle could not operate under fire. The Type SRV-300 modified seizure submersible was designed to operate in a permissive or semi-permissive environment against a submarine that had been slowed, cornered, and was not receiving active support. It was not designed to operate while two Type 071 amphibious ships were under attack from carrier-based aviation, while the surface ASW corvettes were being jammed into blindness by EA-18G growlers, and while a Virginia-class attack submarine was inside weapons range of every planned vessel in the operational area. The seizure vehicle was a tool for a controlled, deliberate operation. What was about to happen was not controlled. It was not deliberate. It was the full, immediate, overwhelming response of the United States Navy. What happened in the next 38 minutes ended Operation Sea Dragon and sent its architects a message that required no diplomatic translation. At 4:33 a.m., the lead Type 093B detected what its sonar operators classified as the acoustic signature of a U.S. submarine, USS Connecticut, at a range of approximately 6 kilometers. The detection was real. Connecticut's crew had allowed it to happen, precisely as the counter-trap required. The Type 093B transmitted a localization report to the operational commander aboard one of the Type 071 amphibious ships and began closing the range. At 4:34 a.m., USS North Dakota's commanding officer received the execute code word from USS Ronald Reagan via ELF antenna. He had been waiting for it for 4 days. North Dakota went active. The decision to go active, to activate the AN/BQQ-10 spherical array sonar in active pinging mode, is never taken lightly aboard a U.S. submarine. Active sonar reveals your position. It announces your presence to every sonar operator within range. But in this case, revelation was the point. North Dakota's active sonar pulse, a focused, high-powered acoustic signal, lit up the underwater environment in every direction and put precise range and bearing data on both Type 093Bs, both Type 056A corvettes, and every other contact in the operational area simultaneously. The message it sent to the PLA Navy sonar operators who suddenly heard it on their receivers was unmistakable. There is a second American submarine, and it knows exactly where you are. The lead Type 093B's commanding officer received the active sonar return and understood immediately what it meant. His submarine, the Hunter, was now the hunted. He had an American submarine behind him, inside weapons range, with a precise firing solution on his boat. He ordered emergency ahead and began an evasive maneuver. He had no workable evasive option. USS North Dakota's weapons officer already had 2 Mark 48 ADCAP torpedoes in the water before the Type 093B's propeller had completed its first revolution at emergency speed. The Mark 48 ADCAP runs at 55 knots. At the engagement range North Dakota had chosen, 2,100 meters, the torpedoes were at their target in under 2 minutes. The first impacted the Type 093B's engine room. The second impacted amidships. The Type 093B, China's most capable nuclear attack submarine, the centerpiece of Operation Sea Dragon's underwater architecture, broke apart and sank in 3,000 meters of water. Her crew did not survive. The second Type 093B reacted immediately, turning to engage North Dakota. It was a rational response. It was also the last decision its commanding officer made. USS Connecticut, the submarine that had been playing the role of bait, had already turned to engage. Connecticut fired 2 Mark 48 ADCAPs at the second Type 093B from a 90-degree offset angle, a crossing shot that gave the Chinese submarine no viable evasion geometry. Both torpedoes found their target. The second Type 093B sank 4 minutes after the first. 2 Chinese nuclear submarines, 4 Mark 48 ADCAP torpedoes, 6 minutes and 40 seconds from North Dakota's first active ping to the last contact fading from the screens. Above the surface, the response was equally definitive. USS Ronald Reagan had begun launching aircraft at 4:28 a.m., 5 minutes before the underwater engagement. responding to the signal's intelligence assessment that the operation was entering its execution phase. In 12 minutes, 18 aircraft were airborne. 6 F-35C Lightning IIs, 8 FA-18E Super Hornets, 4 EA-18G Growlers. The strike packages were already pre-assigned. The targets were already computed. The EA-18G Growlers reached their jamming stations at 4:39 a.m. and activated their AN/ALQ-99 jamming pods simultaneously. Every PLA Navy radar frequency in the operational area. The Type 056A corvettes' search radars, their fire control systems, their communications frequencies dissolved into noise. The corvette commanders found themselves deaf, blind, and suddenly aware from the active sonar pings reverberating through their hulls that their submarine component had been engaged. They attempted to maneuver. They attempted to communicate with the Type 071 amphibious ships to the north. Their communications were jammed. Their radars were blind. The FA-18 Super Hornets arrived over the operational area at 4:41 a.m. at medium altitude. Their targeting systems already locked on the 2 Type 056A corvettes through targeting data fed from the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, orbiting to the east. 8 AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles were fired in a compressed ripple sequence from 4 aircraft, 2 missiles per aircraft, targeting both corvettes simultaneously with a 4-missile salvo each. The Harpoon is a proven and lethal anti-ship weapon against a corvette whose radar and electronic warfare systems have been jammed into blindness, whose crew is in a state of emergency response to the loss of 2 submarines, and whose defensive systems cannot acquire the incoming missiles because their search radars are producing only noise. It is not a contest. All 8 Harpoons impacted. Both Type 056A corvettes were mission killed. One sank within 11 minutes. The other was left dead in the water, burning from a ruptured fuel tank, her crew abandoning ship. The F-35Cs prosecuted the 3 Type 071 amphibious ships simultaneously. The Type 071 is a large platform, 210 meters, displacing 25,000 tons, designed to carry landing craft and combat vehicles, not to survive in a combat environment where it is being targeted by 5th-generation aircraft and precision anti-ship weapons. The F-35Cs each carried 2 NSM, naval strike missiles, the Norwegian-designed over-the-horizon weapons that had been integrated into the U.S. Navy's strike inventory, specifically for exactly this type of engagement. 6 NSMs fired from 3 F-35Cs targeted the 3 Type 071s in a coordinated time-on-target strike. The lead amphibious ship, the one carrying the operational commander and the specialized seizure vehicle, received 2 direct hits. The first impact destroyed the seizure vehicle on its handling deck. The second detonated near the bridge, destroying the ship's command and navigation systems. The vessel was stopped in the water, severely damaged, her commander dead, the operation's entire strategic rationale. The seizure vehicle that was supposed to capture Connecticut, reduced to burning scrap on a flooding hangar deck. The second and third Type 071s each received 1 NSM hit, disabling their propulsion and leaving them dead in the water at 4:58 a.m., 25 minutes after North Dakota's first active sonar ping. USS Ronald Reagan's strike coordinator reported to the strike group commander. All PLA Navy surface contacts in the operational area were either sunk, dead in the water, or fleeing north at best speed. Both Type 093B submarines were confirmed destroyed. The Type SRV seizure vehicle was confirmed destroyed aboard its host ship. The operational commander of Operation Sea Dragon was confirmed as a casualty. USS Connecticut surfaced at 5:04 a.m., not because she had been forced to, because her commanding officer chose to, knowing that every threat in the water around her had been eliminated, knowing that the ships that had been coming to take her were burning or sinking, knowing that USS Ronald Reagan's air wing was overhead and that USS North Dakota was running on the surface beside her in the first pale light of a South China Sea dawn. Connecticut's crew emerged through the bridge hatch into cold, salt air and looked out over a debris field of Chinese naval wreckage spread across the water in every direction. Burning oil slicks, debris from corvette superstructures, the bow section of a Type 071 visible above the waterline before it slipped beneath the surface. The physical remains of 17 months of Chinese operational planning scattered across 3,000 meters of open ocean. The full accounting compiled by U.S. Indo-Pacific Command by noon the same day. 2 Type 09 3B nuclear attack submarines destroyed. Both crews lost. 2 Type 056A corvettes destroyed. 1 sunk, 1 abandoned and sinking. 3 Type 071 amphibious ships mission killed, dead in the water. 2 subsequently sunk by flooding. 1 taken under tow by planned rescue vessels that arrived hours later. Type SRV-300 modified seizure vehicle destroyed. Operation Sea Dragon operational commander killed. Total planned personnel killed or missing, estimated 461. U.S. casualties, 0 killed, 0 wounded. USS Connecticut, undamaged. USS North Dakota, undamaged. 0 U.S. aircraft lost. In Beijing, the Central Military Commission that had approved Operation Sea Dragon convened in emergency session. The operation that was supposed to capture an American submarine, that was supposed to humiliate the U.S. Navy, expose American undersea vulnerability, produced the image seen around the world of a surfaced Connecticut surrounded by PLA vessels, had instead produced the destruction of 2 nuclear submarines, 3 major surface combatants, 500 personnel, and the specialized capability that had been the operation's centerpiece. And it had produced all of this in 38 minutes, executed by a U.S. Navy that had known the trap was being set, had built a counter-trap inside it, and had been waiting with quiet, total patience for the moment to spring it. The image that went around the world was not USS Connecticut surrounded by PLA warships. It was USS Connecticut on the surface of the South China Sea, undamaged and unharmed, with the burning wreckage of Chinese naval ambition visible on the horizon behind her. Somewhere beneath the surface, USS North Dakota descended back to depth and resumed her patrol. Silent, patient, ready. The ocean that China had tried to turn into a trap had become a graveyard for the trappers. The South China Sea, which Beijing had claimed, mapped, fortified, and asserted sovereignty over with increasing aggression for 2 decades, remained what it had always been: international waters, patrolled by the most capable undersea force on Earth, in waters that no declaration and no artificial island and no underwater trap had made or would ever make Chinese. USS Connecticut logged her position at 5:30 a.m. and submerged. She had work to do. This is what happens when you try to capture an American submarine. You do not find an isolated boat with no support and no awareness of your presence. You find a second American submarine running 4 miles behind it, tracking your every move for 22 hours before you even know it is there. You find an aircraft carrier 140 miles away that has been launching aircraft for 5 minutes before your operation reaches its execution phase. You find that the trap you spent 17 months building has a second trap inside it. Quieter, deeper, more patient, and infinitely more lethal than anything you positioned to spring yours. You find that your seizure vehicle, your specialized submersible, the centerpiece of your entire operation, is destroyed on its handling deck before it ever enters the water. You find that 38 minutes after your operation begins, every asset you committed to it is gone. USS Connecticut returned to her mission. The South China Sea did not change. The patrols continued. The intelligence collection continued. The quiet, invisible presence of the United States Navy in waters that free nations have always sailed continued, as it will continue, regardless of what any adversary builds, plans, or attempts beneath the waves. The ocean has no walls, and the United States Navy patrols all of it.